50, 80. And you
Yes,
have less.
exactly.
total
201,
capacity.
Bob.
Yeah,
It's
what?
201.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll continue later.
Thank you. We'll call the meeting to order. I'm sorry, apologize for being a minute late.
No. I started recording.
Okay. All right, Peter, can you do the roll call,
Sure.
please?
Epstein,
Present?
Schroeder. Here. Mediteranda,
Here.
Perot,
Hi, present.
Dornbrook here. Got a full board.
Okay, thank you. Eric, any announcements?
Just like to thank everybody for attending the meeting. For those of you that were also at TriTech, thanks for doubling up in one day. And please use the raise your hand function as that is the only method that I can recognize you wish to speak.
Okay, thanks. So let me see if anyone has any corrections to the agenda or to the consent calendar.
I have a comment. I'm not objecting, but there is actually something I want to discuss, but I guess I can ask the question during the financial report.
Oh, okay. All right, then the agenda will stay. So next question is
Do
comments.
we need to vote on that? No, we don't need to vote when there is no unanimous consent.
Yeah, if someone wanted to move something off, then we would defer it. Okay, so then comments from the audience, opportunity for anyone in the audience or online to comment on something not on the agenda.
We have one hand up.
Okay, and who? Okay,
Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
yes.
Excellent. So this is Adam Brinkman. We're at lot 88. We recently installed the electric heat pump in the kind of remodel of that home. And we're surprised by our increase in EDUs in the newest bill. So the concern was that the EDUs went up as a result of the construction and trying to keep the place at a temperature that wasn't really a kind of a use temperature that it would be at during, I guess, a dormancy period when we actually wouldn't be there. So the EDUs went from 0.5, which was the previous owner, understanding the previous owner didn't really use the place, to 3.1. And so that resulted in, I want to say like a $300 or so increase in our base rate. As this was not representative of normal use, we wanted to comment on the fact that maybe this should be reconsidered. When someone is doing construction on a place, that's obviously not going to be normal use, and B, adjusting to their new system. That's also going to be a period when there are some kind of abnormalities in the usage. So we wanted to bring that to the board's attention. I ran some really basic calculations on our period of use over the last week here in August. This is for the summer. So we, all electric. We have an electric stove and dryer that we use. We were there full time for that full week. And just being there for the summer would result in two EDUs for that week. Or half of an EDU for a week, 2 EDUs for a month. And so wanted to kind of bring to the forefront that during the summer, 2 EDUs would definitely and dramatically increase for a period of long occupancy. Understanding that's not typical usage, but just kind of wanted to bring up a few of those points that one, the usage during construction and adjustment period, and 2, whether that EDU, that the kilowatt hours per EDU is reasonable.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. And if you are attending the whole meeting, item H is where we are discussing some of the issues that might benefit from what you're talking about. And obviously, the other thing I would say is it's a 3-year average. So if you use less going forward, it will drop over time. But I understand your point that the usage was not typical during the construction period.
Right. In the 3-year average, we totally understand. And knowing though, we will be locked into this base rate for a year. We do think that that's an unreasonable cost to incur over that year.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else?
There is.
Yeah, can I just say something? I don't know if you'll be still in the meeting when we talk about potential adjustment, because that could be actually pertinent for you as well. Basically try to emphasize that.
Right.
And I did send him an email highlighting those 2 exact points.
Yeah.
Both the conversion and the recalculation. So
Yeah, and I have more comment to add, that I think the proper discussion is.
We'll do it
this is
during
not
the
discussion
agenda.
time.
Yeah, not here. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, there are other.
The phone
comments?
number raised their hand. They're still muted. They need to unmute themselves. 805, someone from down south. It's not, I don't think it's Carolyn Scott.
Okay, so if there's someone who wants to talk, please unmute yourself. And if not, we'll continue and we'll catch you later. If you're not available now.
Oh, Adam Brinkman was the 805 as well. Okay.
Oh, okay, great. All right, then, are there any written comments from the public that were in the board packet? I don't believe there were.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so next item is to adopt the consent calendar, which includes the minutes, the consent for claims, receivable shut-offs, and also appointing Howard Hoffman to the Finance Committee, and he's stepping off the Planning Committee. So those are the items. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Okay,
You wanna
Peter
move?
moves.
I second.
Bertrand seconds. Okay, roll call, please.
Sure. Epstein.
Aye.
Schroeder. Aye. Minutes Aranda.
Aye.
Perot.
Aye.
Thornburg, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, then we're ready to move on to item 9, finances, and take it away, Kelly.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
So first, I just want to make a comment regarding the fact that these financials are not final. Obviously, we don't finalize June financials until after the audit is complete. And so audit starts Monday, this next Monday coming up. And we usually get our first draft of the audit like the first week of October, somewhere around there. So I don't expect too many changes. We did get our numbers from GASB 68 and 75. I did get those. And both of those are credit to our pension expense this year. So we've had a couple of years where we were actually getting expense, but this year, both the GASB 68 and 75 numbers were netted out at a credit. So I did get those numbers in. Again, I don't expect too many changes, but just a caveat to these financials. So starting with the total operating on page 29 of your packet on the balance sheet for the year end, we were at $591,000 better than plan for operating cash. And then no really other things to report unless there are any questions on the balance sheet.
I have a question,
Yeah,
actually.
go ahead.
Open my thing here. So on this balance sheet, we can see that we have 70 million asset and 59 million liabilities. And then there is about 12 million, it's page 30 that's showing up, I think, 30 or 31, let me check.
30.
So I can't find it anymore. Yes.
Yeah, it's page 30.
Of equity unrestricted. Can you describe how this unrestricted equity is actually computed?
Not in the time we have available. It's just the I don't know how to, I'm not really good at explaining this stuff. It's your it's basically what comes from the P&L statements to balance the balance sheet. So all of our net of expenses and revenues and all of those things, that comes over to the balance sheet to net out the balance sheet and make it balance. Does that make sense?
So the way it's described, it's in equity, net asset, 12
Right.
million. So
Mhm.
12 million of net assets are actually, that should be tangible. So what are they?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay,
Bertrand, I don't.
that's fine. That's
I'd-
fine.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'd have to
Thank
figure
you.
out a way for me to explain that. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at explaining those things.
No worries. Actually, I'm
Okay.
trying to understand because
Sure.
I have a bunch of other questions later, and I wanted to make sure I could understand what this part is actually. So it can be done offline, no problem.
Okay, great. Any other questions about the balance sheet? Okay, moving on to the revenue account by fund. This is the revenue account by fund prior to our property tax allocations, which we'll talk about last here, but this is what the revenue account was prior to property tax allocations. You'll notice that the only fund that actually is negative is employee housing. This is the first year that's really happened in quite a while where only employee housing is showing at a negative. So I really think that the efforts we're making to make all of the departments self-sufficient, you can see here that that's actually coming to fruition. So it's just a good thing for me to see, and it's not something we've seen in a long time. Any questions for regarding the revenue account by fund? Okay, we'll move on to the combined income statement. Operating revenues year to date came through better than planned by $57,000. Total operating, again, year to date shows we're at the negative $519,000 from plan, but again, you have to include that $450,000 property tax allocation that we did in December. So if you come down to the net income loss line, you can see where that nets out, and year to date, we are actually better than planned by $52,000. Any questions on the combined income statement?
And just to emphasize what you said earlier, we don't expect any GASB expenses. They're likely to be credits.
Right.
Okay.
And it is a net credit. There are some departments that did get expenses and other departments that got large credits. So the net for all of it is credits, but don't be surprised to see a couple of departments with actual expenses. And that's just due to the fact that our allocations for those GASB and 68 and 75 expenses are based on a payroll percentage, like how much time the people with retirement expenses spend in each department. So that fluctuates every year between all the departments.
Right.
But it's still nice to see a net of credit for both of those expenses.
Thank you.
Well, actually, I have a question on that page. So it's related to the commercial base rate, second line.
Mm-hmm.
Why did we under budget, actually over budget, this commercial base rate? What was the variance due to? I mean, you are 6% down. I don't think we had much new business, or are there some business that closed that we're expecting?
No, we've discussed the fact that in the budgeting process for last year, which it's noted on our budget variance tracking, that the wastewater base rates were higher because of the timing of when we did our budgeting for the base rates. We hadn't recalculated the base rates yet, and a lot of the EDUs for our commercial water and wastewater were less than what we had expected due to less water use. And that's why we changed for this budgeting season the time frame for which we calculate that, so that I have a clearer.
Yeah, I remember that. So now
Yeah.
that come in contradiction, of the electrical commercial base rate that were up 4.5%. So my question here is, should we have a better hand on estimating how much base rate we are going to collect?
Yes, we have a better hand on it, and you can see it in the July revenue numbers.
Okay.
That we were much closer to what we had expected because we changed the time frame of the calculation so that we could get clearer numbers into the budget.
So you anticipate that the discrepancies are going to smooth out in the current fiscal year?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the combined income statement? Okay, we'll move on then to water on page 36 of your packet. Operating revenues year to date for water were down from plan by $48,000. But again, as you can see, Bertrand, that is directly related to just that base rate issue. And so year to date total operating for water is actually better than planned by $8,500. And again, considering that the base rate issue, we would have been even better than planned had we had a good calculation when we did the budget. Any questions on water? Okay, moving on to wastewater on page 37. Operating revenues for the year to date for wastewater were down from plan by $66,000. Year to date total operating for wastewater is down from plan by $117,000. Again, considering that commercial base rates, it's actually it makes it look worse than it really is. Moving on to electric. Total operating revenues for electric year to date were up from plan by $65,000. And total operating for electric is actually down from plan by $56,000. Moving on to.
Kelly, I have one question on electric that
me.
maybe you can get back to me if you don't know.
No, go ahead.
If we just took this first 6-month period, would we meet all of the Russ covenants without additional property tax? Or
You
or would
know,
we be short?
I don't know that answer off the
Okay.
top of my head, Bob. Amy
All right.
has been filling out our Russ Form 7, and I just got done completing journal entries and things for June, but I can definitely
Yeah.
get you that
I
answer.
think it'd be interesting to just see how we're doing relative,
Sure.
since the revenue is much more stable, to just compare that to what we're working on, just have a sense of where we are.
Absolutely, I can
Okay.
I can get that.
Yeah, anytime.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to propane on page 42. Operating revenues for propane ended the year up from plan by $38,000. Total operating for propane is down from plan by $71,000, and you can see that's directly related to the excuse me, the cost of propane being so much higher than what we had expected. And that's all I have on income statements, unless there are any other questions. Okay, so we'll move on.
Hold on. You know, I have a question actually. So for the year to date, we are 80,000 in the positive for propane, correct?
Yes,
Yes. And this is about 5% of the revenues here. And so my question, I can wait the performance report, but I think somewhere you are showing that the cash on hand for propane is about 250K, 251. So my question is, so we have this budget and things going on, and it looked like over the year, not over 1 month, we are actually, our metering is off. I mean, it's 5% different, it's 5% more than when we actually purchase. And so I just want to know what kind of mechanisms do we have to do corrections? So I mean, clearly we should have a better hand on the propane. I mean, I hope, I don't know if it's doable, but it'd be nice to have a better hand on actually assuming having correct metering on the thing. So my worries is if we keep overselling, over accounting the propane that we sell on a yearly basis and not on a monthly basis, we actually overcharge people. And so since we are actually having excess cash in this department, I just wonder at what trigger are we going to start adjusting things?
I don't see it that way at all.
Okay, so describe.
The propane metering is very accurate. If you're talking about the I don't know if Brandy, if you want to chime in here about the
Bulk deliveries. Yeah, she's explained it multiple times.
yeah.
I think there are two questions that were asked. One is because we can't measure everything going on, at the end of the year, it ends up bouncing out about right. But then there's the second question is, are we running the propane at break even or are we running it at a higher profit? And I would suggest that when we look at the propane rates in the future, we would possibly do an adjustment.
Yeah.
I think that there are two different points going on. Yeah.
Propane does not, we don't have any reserves for propane. So the cash that we have in our operating cash is really all that propane has to, to buy new equipment or to do improvements. So I don't think that we are overcharging by any means, when you consider that propane doesn't have any reserves to make improvements or things like that. So, but I don't know. If Eric, you feel the same or?
I mean, we're getting far off this topic. We're talking about budgeting and future rate studies. So this is not kosher per Brown Act. So I would say we can, if the full board wants to talk about it later on, we can do that or do it in the rate study or whatever.
I think we're just doing budget right now. And there's just a note that when we do the rate study, we'd want to know, look at this. I think there's just a note for later. Thank you for bringing it up. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, we'll move on to proposed property tax allocations for fiscal year 2022. So you can see in the yellow what the proposed property tax allocations are. Obviously, we've already done that electric $450,000 portion. And then also you can see that we are proposing to pay back $30,000 of the loan that solid waste took from electric.
So I have one question on this page, which is, so the totals of the column on the right, does that include the interest from that past year?
No.
Okay, so that'll be added on the top.
On the very last payment, I'll do the final calculation of
Okay,
balances carried. Basically, what I was going to do is I'm going to use the LAIF quarterly interest rates. When we calculate it for snow removal, that's what I did. I used the LAIF actually monthly.
Yes.
And said that was our repayment schedule. So when we do the final calculation of the final payment, all that interest will be done at that very last day.
So that'll be, the number will be higher. Actually.
That is correct.
Yes. So just maybe a little asterisk saying interest not included would be helpful, so people don't get surprised if the number change.
And I do need, we do need the.
We
board
need a board motion to approve the property tax
to approve
allocations, right?
these.
Yeah. Okay, are there any questions or are we ready to? move to approve the property tax allocation
And the proposed repayment. from
and
solid
post
waste.
repayment for solid waste.
Move to approve the allocations and the repayment.
Okay, moved by John. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Sure. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Minutes, Aranda,
Aye.
Perot,
Hi.
Dornbrook, aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So moving on then to July revenues. As you can see, Bertrand commercial base rates are more in line. Residential base rates are, they're not so out of whack as they were for the whole rest of last year, since we were able to since you guys chose to change that calculation date, and we were able to get those numbers ahead of time. Any questions on July revenues? Okay, moving on to cash flow. So you can see on page 46, we ended the year at 3.19 million in total operating cash, which was $573,000 better than planned. And then moving on to the new fiscal year, we ended July at 3 million, just about a little over 3 million, and with that being $78,000 better than planned. And you can definitely see the effect of the more stable revenue coming from electric through the the updated operating forecast through those years. I mean, obviously the winter months are always going to be a little bit higher because of usage, but it's definitely a more stable revenue source, which is really good for our cash flow.
I find that interesting because the number I'm looking at look different to what you just described. So if I look at December, we had 1.4 million in cash in 2021, and we were actually already in the new system. And this year we will only have 1.1 million. So it looks like we will have less cash in hand in December 22nd.
That has to do with which loans are coming due on RUS.
Yeah, we did some major
It's
payment
not an
on principal
allocation.
payments.
Yep.
Which would cause a variation.
So on the revenue side,
And we also have a lot more capital expenses coming through too this upcoming year.
The only thing I'd also like to note is that we're coming up paying off our 9 and 10-year debt
Mhm.
This year. So
As well as the
change.
Bank of the West loan that you can see that goes away in December. I mean, that's not that much per month, but it's still, that debt will be off of our books.
Right.
Any other questions on cash flow? Okay, we'll move on to the budget variances, which you can see the wastewater and water base rates that have been there since the beginning, and then the updated cost of purchase power through June of 22.
so I actually have a question on that. I was looking to a plot showing the cost of electricity, and which actually is coming up. It has been fairly stable for many years, but clearly with all this, what's happening currently is going up. So my question is, it's a finance question. We have set an avoiding cost rate, and so what are the mechanisms to adjust that if we need to? Because the number do not match what we are anticipating.
The
What we-
the cost of purchase power that we are anticipating for the upcoming year is at
Yes.
8.5 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah,
Last year, we budgeted 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So
Is that
again,
good?
it was a budgeting issue,
Yeah.
that's why that variance is on this sheet. So that was corrected in the upcoming budget at 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour. I don't know that there is once the budget is set, there's not a mechanism to update the budget.
And I think there's a conflation of cash flow, cash position, costs, expenses, charges, and budget. This is a
No.
budget variance, not,
it's correct, sorry.
we're not experiencing these. as
Okay,
losses.
I apologize because I jump on that item. I agree, this is a budget variance, so, but let's talk about I don't know if it's the right time here. Let's say we have to pay our electricity 11 cents next year. How do we deal with that? Because this is a scenario which used to be unlikely, but now it's not totally. I mean, we need to be prepared for such
It
a
would
thing.
be up to the board if we wanted to amend the rate schedule. It would
Sorry?
be up to the board if we wanted to amend the rate schedule.
Yeah, so we could
Are
do
you-
that.
You
Yeah,
know,
no, it does. No, I only hear the TV. I'm hearing you, so that's why I keep.
gotcha. I'll yell. I'll try and yell a little bit more.
Yeah,
Anyway, the answer to your question, if we had to do it, we would have to make an adjustment to the rates.
okay.
I think the reason why we're less likely to have that problem is because most of our purchases in the winter, where rates are stable and lower, a lot of the rate variances occurs
Well,
in
actually, I
the
will send
summer.
you a plot that I got. It shows that. I mean, what do we pay today for the purchasing power?
Well, we're buying in the day ahead market, so we're
Yeah,
leaving it to the
just-
market to decide.
Yeah, it varies from day to day. But on average, I mean, we can get you what our average purchase price was last year.
Your bracket would be cool. Yeah.
Randy, do you know exactly what we were paying over, or Kelly, the average across the year?
I do not off the top of my head, no.
So
Not something-
basically, my concern is the rate of electricity is going up everywhere, so it's going to impact us at some point. And so basically, we need to adjust the rate structure if it does.
That would be our remedy if it
And
was
so my-
persistent. If
but
it
my
was
que-
temporary, that would be something
So
else.
my question back to what is the mechanism? So what would it take to trigger such an event? So I think we need to formalize a bit that so we don't get off on the back foot, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Let's wrap up the budget then. Kelly, thank you very much. And we're ready to move on to 9B. Eric?
Yes, so this was at the board last month and went back to finance with district councils. Very thorough, very long report. We reviewed the options at finance, and the finance committee and staff recommend that we follow the advice from the attorney in question 4 and make them a regular customer of the district. There was discussion that this is more analogous, or if not identical, just with the exception of the months, to an irrigation meter, not a regular meter, because it only operates between 3 to 4 months out of the year on recent years. So there was a discussion that the board should, since we haven't talked about connection fees in 5 years, that with regards to irrigation connection, the board could make a policy decision to adjust the irrigation connection fee to match the base rate, which would be 1/3. And that's a suggestion from finance and staff.
Okay, so I had a
And
couple.
Caroline's here from Vail, so maybe she wanted
Oh,
to.
good. Great. Okay, I don't want to interrupt you, but I guess my question is, the lawyer pointed out at the end that the current agreement allows us to make this supply of water optional in case there's any reason why we felt there was a risk of supplying it. And so if we switch to a standard irrigation, can you just explain how we would be able to do the
right
same
now,
thing?
for example, if the wells were going low and Vail was not using that thing, we would be asking for conservation and ultimately asking to start and then ultimately demanding. We're allowed that under the public utility code. Or
Okay.
the portion that applies to water. We're allowed to do that already. Just like we've adopted it for drought to go to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, we can curtail usage. Emergency breaks, we can. So we have the
Okay.
tools at the state level in our ordinances, our rules and regulations to curtail use all for any customer. I could curtail Bertrand's use if he was using more than the snowmaking, which would probably be a big leak, but.
Winter unlikely.
Okay,
So we have the ability to curtail just like we do for.
and we can do it based on individual customer performance, not just everybody treated equally.
We can do it based on a volumetric consideration, absolutely.
Okay, and that's not part of our ordinance. It's part of the general rights.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
and where would those be? I'm just trying to understand
it's
where that
in-
comes from.
I want to say it's the PC, it's not PCC, but it's not PUC, but it's one of the state codes. That's how, when I was in amateur water, we could curtail people's usage when wells were going bad.
Okay.
and things
So
like that.
currently, are we under any stage restriction?
They suggested, there's a suggestion for rural providers, but it's not a requirement at this point. Although I thought it was going to come this month. It hasn't.
Yeah, it's going to happen. I think
It
that's
came
what-
to the urban providers.
Yes.
That was a order for urban providers to go to stage 2, recommendation for rural to go to stage 1, but it was only a recommendation. So I did about a month ago, I think, Rick, we actually dusted off our drought ordinance just to have it ready to go in case we needed to pivot if the governor mandated it or the State Water Resources Control Board mandated it.
But also, the drought doesn't quite exist at our water tables.
Right, but the state is one size fits all,
Yes, I understand till we
Yeah.
fix that.
unfortunately.
Yeah,
But you're
Okay.
absolutely right. We're not in the same situation. We're the first straw on the ground.
if you want to be at the top of the hill, if you want to sell water.
Right. I'm comfortable
That's my
that
advice.
I'm comfortable that we have the ability to curtail usage should there be a threat to our water supply.
Okay,
I could.
And
see that
I'm
potentially.
under no impression that Vail would not do everything to cooperate with us based on history. So I'm not worried that they're going to say no, thumb their nose at us and go get their attorneys in the least. I think they're going to cooperate. They've been a good neighbor,
There's
with the
few,
exception of
oh,
Luke.
please go ahead. Introduce yourself first for
Oh,
people on.
and I don't know if this is on
Just
or.
check the green light on the bottom.
Okay, I don't know if it matters, but.
Yes, it does, because there are people remote that want to hear you.
You might want.
I'm pretty sure they do.
Did the green light, push and hold and the green light should go. Jess, could you get Drew to make sure our guest has a
We have
working
the
microphone?
triangle.
Yep, but.
Okay,
Jess running.
help is on the way.
If not, steal this one, Jess, maybe. Drew charged them all.
Oh. Okay, sorry.
Jess.
I was expecting the entire ring to light up green. Hi all, I'm Caroline Miller. I'm the Director of Mountain Operations at Kirkwood Mountain Resort. And the Finance Committee has been gracious to let me butt into many of Finance Committee meetings to hear what's going on instead of having to play telephone. There's few things that I'll speak, very directly towards when it comes to not wanting to speak out of turn without consulting our legal team. But to Eric's point of when it comes to would we abide by any curtailing recommendations when it came to drought? Absolutely. Especially with the rest of our snowmaking line being under Term 91 agreements, we often treat the Timber Creek hydrant in a similar way, knowing that just because the water is coming from a different source doesn't make it more plentiful. Just because the water for the snowmaking hydrant is coming from KMPUD water and not from Caples Lake, it doesn't make the drought any more or less prevalent rather. I have a couple of questions regarding the conversation that's been ongoing about the contract change, which I know under an irrigation agreement wouldn't technically be a contract. I really appreciate that in our conversations, Eric and the finance committee have all been really forthcoming with Timber Creek being able to make snow benefits all of us, which is, I really appreciate that understanding of it's certainly a one-off. We're not trying to pull any fast ones on you. And if we can make snow at Timber Creek during drought years and the early season, we can have people here, we can have people using water and electricity and spending money and making Kirkwood great. My biggest concern when it comes to switching over to the irrigation contract which I thought about after the finance meeting is just the unexpected cost. And you guys just ran through your numbers. And I know we've been discussing, okay, the connection fee could range from a calculation of $30,000 depending on the EDU to if it was, what is it, 51.7 and it's times the 4239, it would be 217,000, but at a third of it, it's only 72. So anyways, my point is that I'd like to understand just a little bit more as to what about the original snowmaking contract was a one-off, not because I'm doubting it, but because I can't remember why we were hoping to change the contract over to an irrigation agreement, which I think does make sense. And then just to be very transparent, my biggest concern, and I know Matt, the GM's biggest concern, is just the cost associated with connection fees that we don't currently have budgeted, and snowmaking begins in about 86 days. And so those, just to summarize my questions are, Eric, could you remind me what is a one-off, like why we have this one-off contract? And then just to express my concern, regardless of, we want to have a connection that makes sense for the district, and we haven't budgeted $74,000 for a connection fee.
So what makes it a one-off is it's the only wholesale contract the district has, so therefore it's one of a kind.
Okay.
You are not retailing the water that's being sold to you, so that you are technically not a wholesale customer. Why it was ever called a wholesale agreement is beyond me and predates me as well as you.
Okay.
So, and then with regard to the connection fees, basically what connection fees go to, we have existing infrastructure in the ground that people paid for, existing customers, existing developers, et cetera. And 4239 or whatever, I probably got that wrong, 4200 is the equivalent of one new single family coming in and getting the benefit of what has already been paid, which includes the operation maintenance, the replacement schedule, the actual stuff that goes into place. So under the wholesale agreement, you never paid for the infrastructure that you're using and ostensibly damaging just by its very nature of
Right,
use.
just
Everyone
wear and
damages. I
tear
turn on my
aside
faucet,
from
I
everything
damage
else.
the pipe, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what the connection fee is for, is basically
Okay.
paying for your ability to use the existing pipe that everybody is paid for.
And do we have any idea as to why in 2015 there was no connection fee charged towards us? Because I looked through our records and I've never been able to locate, oh, there was some outstanding invoice that's now 7 years old. But
So Peter and I were the only two board members on the board
Okay.
at that time. So as I remember at the time, we treated it like construction water.
okay,
And that was the mindset. It's a little bit like construction water says, I'm temporarily going to use a hydrant for doing construction and then I'm disappearing. So there's no sense of
Right.
durability or a long time. So I think the original mistake was thinking it as construction water as the model. And I also couldn't tell at the time we did it, whether this was a 1 year
totally.
thing just to get it
Well, I
started
think
or
that's the
whatever.
emphasis is it was, we thought it was just a temporary service.
Yeah.
Like our temporary.
So
tent-
no one,
It
yeah.
was the resort,
Like our temporary.
it became
tents.
so successful having that, being able to ramp up snow in Chernoin that it became a
Okay.
permanent service. So now we're dealing with something that
Yeah.
it's kind of evolved on its
Understood.
own.
No, that makes sense. And this is just helpful context. Thank you.
Yeah. So
In the grand scheme of things, I hope it remains temporary. We do,
Right,
we
right.
do have it in our long-term capital plan for snowmaking expansion. But our shorter term capital plans include repairing what we call the cables line, which feeds our snowmaking system in order to even get water pressure to where Timber
Yeah.
Creek is.
Yeah, I understand.
And I thought about this afterwards too, because I was, 2 a.m. when I have insomnia, I think about work.
Same.
I know, it's great.
Yeah. it's great.
But one thing the board could consider, if it really is, I think you said your horizon was about 10 years
Mhm.
before cables came over to Timber Creek. The board could say, if you disconnect within 10 years, they'll refund a portion of the connection fee or the whole connection fee. That might be one way to assuage the cost issue.
Yeah, I agree. If we think of it, what's the general expected lifetime and you're using less than that?
Yeah, generally,
You know,
the pipe that's in the ground here, so the AC pipe has about a 40-year lifetime. It's actually at the end of its useful life. There is some over there. The C900 has Bertrand, has about a 50-year useful life.
Mhm.
So you could consider that in terms of 10 years, it's 1/5 or 1/4 or some combination thereof of life they're getting out of it. And then you could do that. Just
Yeah.
another way to look at it, since you brought up the concern about the cost.
Yeah, and when discussing with our legal constituents about this, there was no question that KMPUD has the right to pull our contract because, one, right to refuse service, and then two, the unique circumstances of this contract. So that part is fully understood. It's really just what comes down to, and as you said, what we're doing currently isn't much different from an irrigation contract, as long as there aren't additional fine print that I don't understand. Just to be frank, if our larger parent company was willing to pour out $75,000 at the drop of a hat, you probably would have seen
We'd
some new
probably be
infrastructure.
going up Mountain Point.
Yes,
already,
exactly.
right? Yeah,
So, and I just use that as an example of,
yeah,
it's a business and you're running a business as well. And so I understand the pieces, but
we're
That'll
not,
be the
we're not
biggest
trying
concern.
to maximize the cost to you. We're just trying to make it
Absolutely.
fit into a structure that's consistent with everybody else.
absolutely.
So there's been two
Mhm.
offers in doing this. One is to rethink how we do connection fees for irrigation.
Mhm.
The second would be is if this really is a limited lifetime and you're not going to use it for the full lifetime, we could offline consider how to factor that in too.
Great.
That would put you on a deadline.
Yeah,
But
which
maybe
I
that
love
helps.
deadlines for action.
Okay.
And
And
then an
yeah.
additional comment, which I'm not sure if it's reasonable and I know that you haven't seen a huge amount of tenure in Kirkwood in the last couple of years. So I would hate to say something. You're going to be stuck with me for a bit, just for the record.
That would be a pleasure.
That would be nice.
And Matt as well.
We're all for that.
One thing that could help us is if we could bide our time a bit. We're currently working with our capital team on both large and unusual asks, which are above $100,000 and then less than $100,000 asks. So August began our fiscal turnover. So we are in a great time to be able to request a connection fee amount, depending on what that amount is, within our next budget year. However, that's me, asking for a little bit of time for this winter to be able to continue as a status quo. And I understand that there are both pros and cons of that. And we could do some legal writing of some sort in order to work on that. But I could see that as an opportunity if we weren't up against the clock of the weather and trying to find connection fee funding.
So basically, you're asking if you could phase in the connection fee over.
I think we need a little bit of time to come to what the new agreement looks like, is what you're asking for.
Well,
Yes.
this, what's being proposed, there is no agreement. It's just a
Right.
normal customer. You just come in, pay your fees, and we go out, we
Right.
set the new meter vault and the new meter pit, because it doesn't have a standard meter vault or pit, which needs to be replaced. We go and do all that stuff, and they're connected. There's no agreement, there's no contract, nothing. It's just, I mean,
I,
and as much as none of us signed a contract when we became KMPUD customers, there is no contract.
I think the only thing we're discussing here is, does the connection fee, in addition to the proposal here, also consider if you're using it for a limited lifetime?
Yeah, but that would be a board action that we could adopt.
Right. And then you would have your information, you could decide. Is there comments from the,
Yeah, just a question, I guess, in the context of being a standard customer, if a standard customer decided not to pay amount that became due, what is our interest rate or charge or what? I mean, I'm just trying to think.
well,
of-
on connection fees, they wouldn't be connected until they paid it. So it's not a
Right.
credit issue.
It's not a credit issue. Do we
Right.
have any sort of payment plans for connection fees or any other thing that we could consider
I
as in our
think
standard
if,
ordinances?
No.
I think if we prorated the lifetime, that would be the limit of our generosity.
And with the reimbursement at the end, that way it's, you're treating everyone the same. Because it's very possible, given history, that thing won't be built for 40 years.
Absolutely. That's why I'm a bit concerned about this lifetime situation, because this was a one-year contract that's been on for 7 years now. So I don't think we should tabulate like that. I think the legal advice is pretty clear. We should switch to an irrigation account, not immigration.
So let me suggest for today that we vote on changing how the EDU is calculated for irrigation to be based on 1/3.
Well, I have comment on that too, actually.
Okay, let's start with that first. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
So actually, but also I was already thinking about this whole thing of both connection fees and base fees and stuff like that. So in the way we do it actually for irrigation general, not specific to well, we have one connection to the side, and then in the same well, we basically put 2 meters. One for the water of the house and one for the irrigation water. And I would argue that actually, and I know in many cities, they actually have different schemes to allow people to water their garden without having a specific meter. So my point is, every customer that already has a water line should not be asked to pay for a full connection fees, because the only thing really has to be done is actually add a new meter in that box. So I know that's not the way we do it, but I think it would make sense for me to be done that way. So that's my first comment. As for the base fee, it's kind of similar. So basically, we are asking people who have used water for irrigation to have a full water account, second water account. And that's not what most utilities are doing. I mean, typically, and I think we need to revise that, because personally, I believe it's detrimental to the beautification of the valley. It's detrimental to the fire readiness. And I understand that the cost of providing the water is the same. That's why the rate is the same for both things. But I think we need to have a second look at the connection fee. So now, if we were going to define that, if you have already an account, you don't have to pay a second connection fee. I'm thinking about someone who would like today to open a connection fee. They have water, and then that changed the calculus that has been made here, saying we could somewhat arbitrarily define it's only 17 EDU. I'm a bit uncomfortable with that, because the volume of water that is involved here is actually pretty big. And we know that we actually wait for an hydrology study that's going to come.
Yes.
This summer, or
There's a hydrology study that is, they've started the process of gathering all the historic documents.
yeah. And I think I'd like to see that before we make any big decision on this well thing, because if we need to add a new well, and the cost is actually very significant, and I don't think we will be able to keep doing this snow thing in the meantime. So I'd like to see numbers, actually. I'd like to see what was the last consumption for the 7 years for irrigation in the valley and for well, see what the impact on our water supply and what the hydrologists say on what we need to do before any big decision made here. On the wool now, back to well, that's for irrigation. Back to well, I totally support the recommendation from the legal team that it should be moved to an irrigation system. As one of the things that was actually explicitly said is, and I don't know what was the cost already spent for the connection here.
There's
But I know-
zero.
Yeah.
So I want to correct, there may be a misconception. When a resident gets a connection fee, they get a connection fee for water, and then they decide whether they want 2 meters or 1 meter.
Correct.
So there, all right, this is a case where there's a connection for water and they're only using irrigation. And so I think it's reasonable, the proposal to say, since we've taken all of irrigation, assume it's for a narrow period of time, that we divide it by the 1/3. So I find that to be consistent and reasonable, and in the interest of time, we can't wait for a hydrology study or anything else. I think, and we already know how to contain the water for this purpose. So I think it's reasonable to go ahead and proceed with this point at this meeting.
Okay, so actually, I went on the connection fee schedule on the website, and there is no irrigation connection fees.
It's a water
a
fee
water
if you're
account.
doing irrigation
Yes.
only. We have very few customers that
Yes.
are irrigation only, but we do
Yeah,
have a few.
yeah.
It's the Girl Scouts.
Oh, I was trying to think, who on earth is?
We were gonna make it
Wasn't
up.
you.
We weren't gonna make it a prize for whoever gets it right.
Oh.
I forgot we were
Well,
gonna
we
do
were
that.
just, we were discussing the 4-month window, and that was an important component of
Yeah.
our conversation in the finance meeting was, if I only get the water from June to October, that irrigation connection isn't gonna do me very good. And
No.
they said there could offset the irrigation timeline, and I have been thinking since the finance meeting, who on earth is the other irrigation customer?
There you go. Now you know.
Girl Scouts.
Well, I really am in support of helping getting snow make. I mean, besides, with climate change, they may need more and more of it. And I'm just concerned we are setting some things without thinking through how is that going to evolve in the future. And that's where I'm basically.
Right. And I think as
Yeah.
part of the water master plan study,
Yeah.
we'll know more over the course of a year.
That is
But at the moment, we're just trying to correct a situation that we do have control over. If there's a shortage of water, we can deal with that.
And there was no question last year when during Caldor, when there was a comment on the aquifer being quite low, I called up my team immediately and said, no one turned on the snowmaking fan gun, right? And they said, no, the snowmaking fan gun has never been on, so that we can make sure that that PUD has that water. So I have a tangible example of us being ready and willing. And then we were calling around trying to tell the fire crews to hook up to our water.
Right.
So we're amenable. I
Okay. So
promise.
thanks. So let me see whether John or Doug have any comments to add, and otherwise I have a recommendation.
Yeah, I think, well, we talked through pretty much the same conversation in the finance committee meeting. And I think we arrived at this recommendation based on, having what was supposed to be a temporary contract that's very different than all our other customers. District council's recommending that we don't have this special case, and I think we ought to take their advice. I think the connection fee being 1/3 is very fair, given the limited number of months that they use the service. So I'm sure we can do more with further rate studies and things like that, but I think this is an item that we ought to clean up based on our legal counsel's advice. So I still like the recommendation that we were making from the finance committee.
Okay, Doug, anything you want to add?
I agree with John and the comments here. Bertrand, I recognize his comments. I do think that we should be able to address those through other mechanisms in the future, but I think this as proposed makes sense to me. And I would just, as long as we can be, good partners in this, and as Caroline's comment of making sure that the payment structure makes sense and all those things that we need to make sure that this continues and that whatever we're doing here should not hopefully impact any of the snowmaking operations for this calendar year and the ski season upcoming. I'd hope that we can make sure that this works so that this is a smooth transition.
Yep.
So the motion I would make would be to authorize changing how the connection fees work for irrigation to be 1/3 of the water irrigation.
I'm still stuck here.
I'd like to finish my motion and then you can vote against it or discuss it or
Okay, I
whatever, but
cannot
let me just
discuss.
finish.
I'm not done. You interrupted me. I have more things I wanted to say.
Go for it.
Thank you.
But, okay, at some point we have a time limit.
So my problem again with what's proposed, it's basically, it's open-handed. I mean, it's basically becoming a new thing. It makes sense to apportion the connection fee to, for example, 10 years. So it started in 15, 25, that'd be 10 years. And then that would be a quarter of the connection fee. I have a problem that we arbitrarily decide that it's going to be a third of based on the past consumption. We don't even have the consumption. As I said, I'm okay to find a solution to help resort doing snow this year and to change things, but it has to be still temporary. I'm not ready to vote for that motion, which is changing things in the concrete. They become suddenly bona fide immigration customers, and that remove all the restriction of usage clause that we have in the current contract. I don't know if they could force us, and like you said, there's a lot of turnaround, so we may have other people with different tune in the future who are going to require that we deliver that water if they are regular irrigation customers. So I am totally uncomfortable with what's proposed here, and I think it needs to be done in a way that's temporary until we can assess all the stuff that need to be and do it properly.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to continue with my proposal that we, since the study omits what happens in an irrigation only situation, that we take the connection fee for irrigation and treat it as 1/3 the same way we do everything else in comparison between irrigation and water. And in addition, that we authorize the general manager to look at if someone's going to use it for less than its lifetime, what consideration should we provide? So that's my motion. I'll ask if there's a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Doug
You
seconds.
said Doug?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Discussion.
I mean, I just want to ask a question of Bertrand, you made some comments there that I didn't think were my understanding of, like, you said we don't meter this and that the third is arbitrary and things like that. And that's not my understanding. So am I misunderstanding something? I guess, Eric, like, where did the 51.2, I thought we were meeting this. I mean, what am I missing then, I guess, because my understanding as Bob proposed this makes sense to me given what I think I understand, but you're making it seem to me that I'm missing something very important then, Bertrand. So help me understand where I'm going wrong.
Me or Eric?
Eric, do we meter this meter? Where did the 51.2 come from?
Yes, we do meter this. And if you look at the prior staff report, it was we used the average of their usage to come up with the 51.2.
Correct. So, and Bertrand, you said the 1/3 is arbitrary, but I'm not sure that my understanding is that it's based off of the quarter of the year that they would be using it.
No,
or the third of the year, the 4 months.
So currently, the irrigation base rate, not the connection fee, the base rate is, it looks like it's 1/3.
It is 1/3.
But it should have been 512, actually. I'm not sure why it's 1/3. But, so anyway, that's a number that's used for the base rate, has nothing to do with any connection fee I actually like to discuss more about this irrigation customers, but that's a different topic. So my concern is once we cross that Rubicon, they become a normal customer, and the terms are not in line with everybody else. I mean, the consumption can be so different from one year to the other. The snowmaking is not going to be the same every year. It's going to be way, and I'd like to see the data, the variability. We are told 51 EDU currently, but it could be very different. So I'm very concerned if we do something open-handed like that. I think we need to find a solution that's fine for everybody, including Val. But what we do here is write in stone something that is very arbitrary.
Okay, are there other comments from the board, or should we call for a vote?
I mean, I guess my only comment would be is like, having the agreement as it stands is arbitrary as well. So, I mean, I think we're moving to something that's more standard and more consistent. So, I mean, maybe there are deficiencies here, but I think the major concerns of being able to cut them off are addressed. And, you know, Erica's, makes me feel comfortable with that. And I don't think the 1/3 is arbitrary. I think it's consistent with other things that we've done, at least my understanding. So I think I'm comfortable with it as is. And I think hopefully we can address any other concerns that come up in the future.
So I thought I can make a calculation. I mean, currently, what is base fee for irrigation? It's 10 something. I could look at my thing, but don't give me.
It's exactly the same, but it's calculated as 1/3
Why?
because you only use it for only 1/3 of the year.
Here.
No, 512.
We aren't allowed to make snow past March.
No. You, in your case, you may actually use only 2 months, actually. You know, so that's what I'm saying. I mean, you are picking 1/3 from where?
Well,
From
1/3 is
base
what we
rate.
voted
We
on
turn on the
last year.
irrigation meters in June. We turn them off at the beginning of June, and we turn generally some week in June, and we turn them off some week in September. That is 4 months.
Yeah.
June, July,
Yeah.
August,
October is
September.
open.
October, actually.
October is open.
Mid-June to mid-October is 4
No,
months.
it's June. It's 5 months. June.
It's
to
not supposed to
October.
be. So I'll address that with our operators if they've been doing it wrong. Because the rate study and the board action
Was 4 months.
was 4 months.
Okay. I'd like to call for a vote. So Peter, would you do the roll call?
All right, do you think we're pushing this through without getting enough data?
I think it's fair to ask for a vote on a resolution. And if people don't feel they're ready, they can vote against it.
And what happens if they ask us to deliver water? Because
If we don't have the water, we cannot deliver it. That's already understood. Erica's already confirmed that exists in code that we can count upon. We've already heard from Vail that they're willing to honor that. So I'm willing to trust both of these people that they know what they're talking about.
The only thing, Bob, is you need to, in your motion, you should amend it to include termination of the existing contract. You need to have
Okay.
both.
All right, we'd include termination of the existing contract. Okay. That's fine.
You want to repeat, maybe you should repeat.
Yeah, and the other
Motion,
thing is,
just-
so
just
they are asking for
to make it
time for the
clarify
connection
it.
fee.
No, we're not offering that. The resolution is that because there was no connection fee defined for an irrigation only connection, that we would define that to be 1/3 of a water connection for the connection fee. In addition, we would notify termination of the current contract, and we would authorize the general manager to explore what compensation or what terms we would offer if you don't plan on using it for the full lifetime. Those are the 3 points.
And Peter, you said you feel like we're rushing into this. I mean, we've engaged legal counsel on this, staff's worked on this, the finance committee's worked on it. So, there's been a significant amount of thought put into it. It's not as if this is a knee-jerk issue.
So the finance committee is comfortable with this arrangement.
Yeah, Doug's on the finance committee. I'm on the finance committee. This is what general manager, I think, is in favor of.
Or the finance committee, excuse me.
This is what our legal counsel recommends.
Okay,
And Vale has been a participant. Caroline in particular personally has been involved in at least the last 3 finance committee meetings where we've talked about this. And so I don't feel like we're doing this without input from them, especially given this impacts them more than anyone else.
Yep, good point.
realistically, do you think Vale is prepared to make that payment if we pass this? Make the connection.
Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, do you think Vale will be able to make that payment on short notice like this?
Realistically, I have no idea.
Okay.
It is the largest sticking point, and it's a bit of a reprieve from the possibility of 230 at the beginning of this conversation, multiple
Sure.
finance committees ago. That would have not been an option.
Right.
And it's not in my operating budget. And I would have to pencil the cost benefit analysis of opening Timber Creek this year.
Right.
And largely factoring in the ability to, which, I mean, none of this is a surprise. That's where we do our ski school. So
Right.
that check will be written far above my head and that of Matt Jones as well. So we will continue to.
We're just trying to
push.
give you something specific to work with.
Yes, yeah, and I appreciate that for sure, because when the conversation began oscillating between 30,000 and 230,000, it is good to have a number to work off of. And so the short answer is we will search for the funds, definitely.
So this proposal is basically a compromise to try to encompass all the parties.
And I said
Is that
that-
correct? I mean, is that where you see it?
I see it as we didn't have a connection fee for an
Right.
irrigation only.
Right.
And it is reasonable, since an irrigation only has less value in terms of its time horizon than the others, that it's not an unreasonable thing to establish that as a connection fee.
And they can use this for fire suppression if required?
No,
No, because we would be requesting only the months. The hard start and stop would be mid-October to mid-January would be our preference of months. So if there was a
Right.
fire, we would allow you to use it obviously for fire suppression. But
I think if there's a fire, we'll put it out first and negotiate the water later.
Okay.
I'd like to think that's.
we
our
don't charge
approach.
anyone
Because
for
historically-
What's
fire
that?
water. We don't charge for fire water.
There we go.
I mean, we don't.
I mean, we'd use the hydrant.
Well,
Yeah.
and even
no,
fire
we're not
suppression
gonna
in
use the
Vale's
hydrant
buildings or in
anymore.
commercial buildings,
yeah.
we don't charge
All
for
right,
it.
so
We're
Right.
not going to use the hydrant anymore, is my understanding, if this goes through. We're going to use.
Correct. It'll be a
You're gonna
standard
put it in a new
connection.
pit?
It'll be put in a thermocoil, correct. It'll become a standard connection per our standard drawings and details.
And what's the estimated cost of doing that?
I don't know, 2-inch meter, there's already one there, so they don't have to pay for that. It's just gonna be the thermocoil and the labor probably. And maybe some valving
How are
minor.
you going to disable that hydrant?
We'll take the meter off of that.
Oh, okay, that's all.
I have a proposal. Why can't, and I would move forward on this proposal as it is, if we can make it revisable in 2 years or 3 years time, I don't know what. you think.
Anything we vote on, we can always change.
Yeah, so I want to make.
It's
clear
permanent until
that
it's changed.
This is not, we are not.
You've expressed your reluctance to do it and your desire to vote against it. And if there's a better idea in the future, as a board, we
Okay,
could
so I stay on
approve
my
it.
note. Okay.
Yeah, so I understand. Yes, go ahead.
I want to speak to one thing that Peter asked just a moment ago of could we use it for fire suppression? I do want to call out that a request I did make of the finance committee and of Eric was that because it's a hard start and stop date with an irrigation connection, we do have the authority to use the water as we see fit. So for example, street sweeping is an opportunity for us to use water. And so if we were doing street sweeping after our hard open date, we could use that for other purposes besides snowmaking because we'd
That's
continue to
correct.
be.
But the only caveat is you cannot use it for any purpose that sends it down the sewer.
Exactly.
Other than that, you can use it like any other irrigation
Mhm.
customer uses their irrigation.
Okay.
Right, so
Absolutely.
the whole irrigation difference was that we wouldn't process the water,
Okay,
and that was a huge expense.
I'd like to call for,
Originally.
So,
I'd like to
Okay.
call for a vote.
And we already have a
Call for a
second.
question, calls for an immediate vote under
so if,
Robert's rules. Well,
Right, yeah,
if we are doing 1/3, which is 4 months, is the current, I mean, the line will be closed for the 8 months they are not charged for?
yes, just like we do irrigation, it'll be turned off and locked.
So that makes
Okay.
some consistency.
all right, Peter, roll call, please.
Okay, Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Minaturanda,
Aye.
Perot,
Yeah, I'm still going to vote
Yes or no?
no,
Okay.
because as I said, I think there is some loopholes and situations that are not covered with this agreement, and I understand that we could revise it in the future, but I'm concerned about jurisprudence we're making here, and so I'm voting no.
okay, Dornbrook, aye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're ready to move on to item 9C, snow removal contract billing. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Alan.
thanks for coming.
Thank you for the
Thanks for coming.
comments.
Okay. And you are free to go. And do you have to get escorted to go across, or do you go all the way around?
I've been living up here.
Ah,
Oh,
wise decision.
I live in Market.
okay. Thank you for
Have a nice weekend.
attending.
Thank you.
Okay, so snow removal contract billing, this came up during one of our recent snow removal discussions as to why we were billing in four increments for snow removal instead of one. And so took this to the finance committee as directed by the board, and the finance committee recommends that we change the frequency from 4 times per year to 2 times per year, with those 2 dates being October 1st and January 1st annually, and that the district offer an incentive for the HOAs to pay their snow removal by ACH of 2.5%, not to exceed $1,000 per year, and that these changes do not become effective until next fiscal year. I guess I should have let Rick go with that. I forgot I made him put his name on that one.
Okay,
Sorry,
Rick, you want to repeat that or add anything to it?
No, I have nothing to add. Good summary, Eric.
Well, I think some of the other discussion at the finance committee meeting was, should we ask for 1 payment instead of 4? Part of the issue is just administrative overhead of chasing down the payments. We've got a lot of HOAs. Some of them would change the treasurer, and sometimes it would be hard to track down who the new treasurer would be and things like that. So we wanted to lower the administrative cost, which lowers cost for all customers in the end. But there was some concern that some of the HOAs would be financially challenged to make that 1 payment. So we decided to compromise on that and go to 2 invoices. So we cut the admin overhead in half, but we still are amenable to the needs of the HOAs. There was another discussion around the negative cash flow, that perhaps financially it would be better to collect the invoices even earlier in the year than October, but it didn't seem fair to be charging for a service that's not being provided at the time. So we decided to set the 2 invoice dates at October and January.
And then John, I would have just added in general, having the incentive to have the 2.5% has benefits to not just snow removal, but hopefully to other accounts that someone else has, that having ACH for the collection challenges, not just for snow removal, but for all of our other services, that hopefully people will be able to take advantage of that and have an incentive to do it, set it up.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but the ACH discount only applies to snow removal contracts? Or are you proposing
Yes.
it to be broader?
Just for snow removal contracts.
Okay. Right. Okay, other discussion?
So I totally support moving to 2 invoices instead of 4. It's a simplification that would help the district and therefore reduce cost. So, and then it's a plus for the HOA themselves. And I don't think they will have any problem with it. That's one thing. The second thing is 2.5% ACH. I find it discriminatory toward big HOA. So I think we need to find a way to encourage that ACH in a different way. Either it has to be the same for everybody. I don't think we should penalize big HOA because and so it could be a fixed cost. It could be, but I think it should be the same for everybody. And I don't capping it to meet $1,000 is actually it make it different for everyone. So I'm against that proposal. And I'm not sure why it's so important to have people to pay ACH for the snow removal contract. It might be talking about.
I can answer that if you would like me. I can answer that if you'd like
Yes,
me to
please.
answer that. So to give you an example, there was an HOA that did not pay their snow removal bill. Snow removal period started. They were not getting snow removal because their treasurer sold their condo and they didn't have a new treasurer who had the checkbook. So they weren't getting snow removal. They let us know that. So we were able to start it up again, trusting that they would pay, which they ultimately did. But the amount of staff time to track and chase these people down, this happens with every HOA. Every HOA has had this issue since I've been here where they've not paid stuff on time. Every single one without exception doesn't pay stuff on time at one point or another. This is to incentivize them to go to ACH. So when the treasurer does sell their condo and they get a new treasurer, it doesn't matter. It's already on the ACH and it just happens by rote. The $1,000 was an arbitrary number selected by the finance committee based on what we thought the ROI would be. Anything more than that would ruin the ROI, and there's no point in offering an incentive.
Yeah, so I'm back. So we divide the problem by 2 by switching from 4 to 2. So that's a fact. In that situation where the people sell the condo, I'm not sure the ACH would have come quicker, but again, I can see why we want ACH because it's make it easier for the staff here at the PUD, but I don't think we should cap it this way. Small HOA would have, it doesn't seem fair to me. I mean, if you want to do, I don't know.
You could require them to pay by ACH and give no incentive and just make it a stick instead of a carrot.
Well, I think that the $1,000 related to the cost of collections, not to the size of the contract. So collecting from a large HOA like East Meadows or KMA isn't any easier or more difficult than collecting from a really small HOA. So the 1,000 was more based on what sort of cost benefit are we getting out of that, not a bigger incentive for a bigger HOA. So at least that's how I thought about it.
No, I understand what you try to do here. I just think this thing is discriminatory toward big HOA. And I'd like to have something that is not discriminatory. And why not a fixed amount, $100? If you do pay by ACH, it's going to be $100 less. First, it would cost less if you do the computation of all the 23 HOA, and then everyone is treated the same.
Make a motion with that as an amendment.
Okay, so now can you help me with a
Sure.
number? 100, 500, 200, what should I take?
Considering I have one contract that I don't want to pay someone to remove their snow because there is a contract that's less than $500.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we did the 2.5%.
Right. Now, I know, but I'm just.
And we didn't want to do straight 2.5% because then we'd be losing money, right?
Right. Exactly. And
I mean,
as you said,
the reality is there's a fixed cost to do this. To every collection is going to cost us $150 or $200 for any late bill, no matter the size of their bill. But at the same time, when their bill is $500, they're getting a discriminatory, 40% discount on their bill as opposed to something else. I mean, there's just a reality of that we're not dealing with orders of magnitudes that are anywhere near the same in snow removal, where some contracts are $250,000 and some are a few $1,000s. So I don't know that there's a perfect solution to this. I think the intent of this is in the right direction. So I'm open to a better idea than this, but I think that's the challenge that we're going to run into, is that we're not talking about tightly clustered number of values that are going to be consistent. Our contracts are very high variance in terms of their total value.
So, okay, based on the discussion here, I think $100 would be appropriate value to offer as a discount. So my motion would be to amend the $1,000 ceiling by $100 discount per contract if people pay by ACH.
The only thing I would just point out, Bertrand, is that's discriminatory in the reverse way, because now Sun Meadows 3-4 is getting a 25% discount and KMA is getting a 0.005% discount. That's why we tried to at least make some, so some people won't benefit. This was the compromise to make it as neutral as it could be.
Well, no, $100 isn't going to motivate anybody. No.
$100 for $500. I think it is an incentive. On 200K, it doesn't change things, but I think they might still do it. I don't know. In some aspect, I think giving $1,000, okay, I could vote for it. You have a point. I mean, it is.
You could lower it from
discriminatory.
to 500 if you want a number closer. I mean, realistically, Kelly, I mean, if when Drew's chasing these people down, and it's mostly Drew, it can be upwards of 4 hours per HOA, assuming they all did it. About 4 hours, Kelly, chasing it down over and over again.
So that's curious because.
No, I'm asking Kelly, just
Yeah. Go ahead.
please.
Yes, that's, and, 4 hours over, a long period of time. Obviously, it's not 4 hours every day or anything like that, but yes, that's a good number. And sometimes it's more than that because we're having to chase down different people and we don't know who the board presidents are and so on and so forth. So, yes.
So we bill $50 an hour for labor. So if it averages out to 4 hours for over the 22 contracts, maybe 200 is the number. I don't know, but I don't know if that would incentivize anyone either. I'm just giving you facts. It's a policy decision for the board.
Let me just weigh in. I think the proposal is reasonable. And I know I would call my HOA board and say, if you don't do this, you're wasting my money and it costs nothing to sign up for it. And it saves everybody time, but I at least have something to go and yell at. And if we got 24 people to each talk to their HOA and just got this all in ACH, it would be pretty nice. So this seems like a reasonable compromise given the size, the huge variation in the size of the contracts, and it limits our exposure.
Yeah, so
I don't know if there's a better set of numbers, I'm happy to hear about it, but I'd like to hear about it soon.
Yeah, we both have.
okay, so I resend my
Yeah.
other proposal. I have another one, which is reduce the percentage to 1%.
And the not to exceed how much?
So ACH of 1% and then keep your cap of $1,000. Is that what you think? That was what was acceptable for the PUD. That I would be comfortable voting in with the discussion we had before. Yeah.
And why is 1% a better number?
Say it again.
Why is 1% a better number? Why do you think that's enough incentive? But
It's less discrepancies between the HOAs.
no, it isn't.
Yeah, if you do 1%, first it's going to cost less to the PUD. Honestly, if you do the math, it's actually become a significant money here. So as is 1% is going to be less less costly for the PUD, and it's still going to be an incentive for people to do something.
Well,
Here it's a reverse visa credit card thing. I mean, credit cards are typically 2.9. I think that's a lot. I'll be more comfortable with 1.
Yeah, the 2.5 is more similar to like what you normally charge if you use credit cards and things like that. So seemed like that would be an acceptable number that would be big enough to motivate the HOAs. So I don't see why, I heard the word arbitrarily a lot today. I don't see why arbitrarily 1% is better than 2.5%. And, you know, a group of people go off and work on this, and this is what we came up with.
Okay, so how did you pick 2.5?
In my mind, it was related to, you know, what's a big enough number to motivate the HOAs to sign up for ACH. And I think it's, you know, and I also was thinking about that, you know, usually you get a 3% credit card fee if you're going to charge by credit card. So you're going to go buy your license plates, and that'll motivate you to do a transfer instead of a credit card fee. So it seemed to be in the neighborhood of that same percentage. So I'm sure that, you know, 2% or 3% would probably also work. I think 1% is pretty small.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are upsides to, again, part of the motivation of this is that ideally, I think from a district perspective, we would let every customer on ACH for all services. And because of snow removal being in the structure of it, how it is different than, you know, some of our other services, we have the opportunity to help incentivize people to do this and hopefully get people to, so there, you know, you know, if the cost 2.5% doesn't cost us anything in our budgeting and our actuals, and we can recover that later in the future if we had to. I mean, that we know that this shouldn't, the cost side of it shouldn't be as significant of a 2.5% versus 1%. But I think having a 1% just seems like that's nothing. 2.5 seems more reasonable from what I would expect, and I think we've capped it in a reasonable way. So
So did you compute how much that was going to do, 2.5?
2.5 times the size of our contracts. Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Did you
capped
We
at
capped at
$1,000.
$1,000. So how many, we have a, you know, contracts that range from $500 to $250,000, where I think most of them are under $40,000. I would guess. I don't know, Eric can
I think
correct me on that.
most are
Most
under
are under
20.
20,000.
Yeah,
Or
most are
20,000.
20.
So-
There's Palisade, Juniper Ridge over 20, and then KMA and East Meadows over or at
Yeah,
the
so
200
basically
mark.
you
If you
have done
take
the
away
math.
the two large ones, almost everything else averages closer to $12,000.
Oh, okay. That sounds, that I could believe that for sure.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, yeah, I mean, 12,000 across 18 HOAs. 6, so $7,000 or $8,000. $7,000 or $8,000.
Yeah, that's a lot. I think it's too much.
Wow.
Okay, so I think it's time to just find out where people are on this number and vote and move on. So the only question is 1 or 2.5% of the two on the table. Can we just get a poll of what people would vote for, Peter?
I go along with the recommendation of the finance committee.
So that would be 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay, John?
Go the 2.5.
Okay, and Doug?
2.5 is fine with me.
Okay. And Bertrand, you're at 1%?
1%.
Okay, so a 1% motion would fail. A 2.5% motion would pass. So we can go through those, or we can just move to the 2.5%.
Yeah, someone just needs to make a motion and adopt it.
Okay, John, do you want to do that?
Yeah, a motion to adopt the recommendation for the finance committee for 2 invoices a year, October 1st, January 1st. And an incentive for the HOAs to pay the ACH of 2.5%, not to exceed $1,000 a year, to be all made effective for the next fiscal year.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mediteranda,
Aye.
Perot,
No,
Thornburg, aye. Passes 4-1.
Okay. Let's move on to item D. Randy?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So we have here in your packet the June performance report, which was the end of last fiscal year, and also the July numbers. So I'll go through these quickly. For June, we ended our fiscal year for electric losses at 14% unidentified loss. This compares to 12% from last year. And that is something that we're going to look closely at. We'll be doing our system analysis starting on the 23rd of this month with exponential engineering and going out to every transformer. So it is unlikely that there are new unmetered uses out there, but it's something that we're going to look at because I like to see that number go down and not up. For propane, we ended the fiscal year at -5% as opposed to -2% for last year. So slightly better. Water, we ended at 11% for last year as opposed to 12% loss for the year before. So slightly better in water. And wastewater, we ended the year, this fiscal year, at 49% unidentified or I&I into the system, as opposed to 31% for last fiscal year. So wastewater is also up. We are still looking at whether that can be attributed to the Caldor fire issues that we saw with equipment over our lines, or if it's just that we had more water, both from snow melt and also rain in this later part of this fiscal year. Any questions on last fiscal year's performance report? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Hold on. So yes, 14% is disappointing. It's still a huge number. I'm glad to hear that you are going to look at it. I mean, these tables are, it's good to report, but ultimately we need to address the issues. And one thing I'm thinking here is part of our unmetered loss, unidentified losses, may be coming from all this transformer that stay live for the whole summer for nothing. And the way to solve that would be to have actually the meter upstream of the transformer, not downstream. And I don't know if that's possible because of the high voltage, but that's a problem. Like we are metering post big transformer, but all these transformers are probably costing us a lot to keep energized. And I think I'm looking forward to see the analysis from the engineer and see if they have any comment in that direction. And actually, I see that last July, we had 26%. And this, I mean, that's even more. So it's really very concerning. On the electricity, the other thing I noticed is we are at 6.8 gigawatt for the metered consumption. We are still below 7. I suspect occupancy year over year went down. I'm not sure. I've not seen an occupancy curve this time in the packet. We are 250 for residential, and we are 250 megawatt hour below what we had consumed the previous year. And I just take the opportunity to say that it'd be cool to be able to have on the website the yearly. We don't have currently yearly. When you click on yearly, it just shows month by month. It doesn't show for the full season. So that's a different topic. And now that's for the electricity. Now for propane, I was mentioning earlier that we are at -5% over the year. And that's also concerning. I think we need to, if we 1 or 2% be something, but 5% to me is a threshold where we need to start worrying about what's going on. And I hope we can look at that as well. So that's all for this performance report.
Okay. Thank you. If we go on to the first month of this fiscal year's performance report, as you say, Bertrand, our unidentified system losses for the month of July are 26%. We will see how August turns out, but a couple of comments on that. One is that we did have several outages and have to run the generators at the powerhouse. Anytime we have outages and have to heat the transformers back up, that does contribute to our losses. We also were not able to get to the backside to do meter reads in July, so that may also contribute. Propane for the month is a high negative month. So basically that means that we received into our tanks and then saw expansion in the tanks because the temperature is likely. But again, that's something that we will keep an eye on going forward. Looking back at last fiscal year for these two utilities, both of our losses were 3% last year. So these are significantly different. They do vary year to year. And then we take a look at water and wastewater. For water, July gave us a 19% loss as compared to 13% last year this time. And we saw 16% in I&I for wastewater, where we saw 24% last July. So that is where we stand right now. We've also included just for July, the average aquifer level sheet, and then we have the graphs that show usage versus temperature for each of the departments. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So for the water, that was June. So in June, we basically pumped 600 and process the double amount. So is the difference runoff, or is it actually our tank going lower? Or do you have any insight on that?
She's explained this every month for the last 6 months. I don't know why we keep asking the same question. I mean, it's the way it's delivered. It's the temperature. It's going from liquid to gas. I mean, am I wrong? Have we not explained this?
I'm unclear on what the question is. Is it about June propane or
No, on the water. So now
On-
Sorry, I thought you said
not paying
propane.
attention. Something.
June water?
Sorry, I was trying to get air conditioning in here for all of us. Sorry about that. Trying to be helpful.
To do what?
Trying to get air conditioning for us because it's hot, but I understand it's unappreciated. Got it.
The June water numbers. So the question is, why is the production different than the meter?
The question was, have you noticed such? I mean, it's a big difference. We pump 600 and we process 1.2 double. So my question was, are our tank going low? Because even if there is effectively difficult discrepancies in temperature and stuff like that, it seems like a lot. So I'm just asking, our tank are still fine.
It just depends on where the tank
fine.
starts and ends in a particular, it depends on where the tank starts or ends in a particular month. It depends on the volume in the tank and how much you're using of the tank, how much you're using from the pump. So we could have completely full tanks, which would therefore you could sell all that and you wouldn't have any well
so you are not
production.
listening to my question in this case. Okay, you want to deviate like that. What I want,
I was responding to what I thought you had asked, Bertrand. That's what I was doing.
Back to my original question.
Could I answer the question, please?
I have a suggestion too, which is, could we just work out, what we think these service levels, what's a reasonable amount of loss for each one of these utilities? And then we can look at it and say, is it something that we have to take immediate action because we're out of bounds with, or are we within a reasonable bounds? Because there's a lot more detail to this that I certainly don't know. I haven't run a utility, so I don't know if 12% or 14% or 8%, is really good or bad. But if there is basically a threshold in there that said, hey, if we're within these bounds,
let's have.
and when we get outside of those bounds, then we got a red flag and
We
say,
do have those numbers on an annual basis, but let's let Brandy answer the question first.
okay.
Brandy, please go ahead.
Thank you. I believe that the answer here is we produced out of our wells 605,000 gallons in June. We treated at our wastewater treatment plant more than twice that. That is I&I, that is water, that is snowmelt or rain getting into our system that we're processing. It has nothing to do with the level of the tank.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. And I also support whoever said that it'd be nice to have a comparison to start. So in your spreadsheet for year to date, at least at the end of the fiscal year, if you could add what was the previous year, that'd be kind of nice to see if we are looking fine compared to other years. That would be my comment.
Okay, Brandy, you want to continue?
That's all I have, because you're correct, Bob. The goals that we list here are based on averages and what we are shooting for, John. So you'll see in parentheses goals on an annual basis for everything except the wastewater system, which is because of the age of our system and the amount of I&I we see, it's a moving target.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Brandy, next item is 9E, meter shed status.
Absolutely. So
Thank
just
you.
wanted to bring this back before the board, not because we're doing anything different now, but because we will start to see some additional people go onto the shutoff list later this year if they do not make corrections or sign the agreement. So in your packet, there's a staff report. Just wanted to make some highlights here that everyone on the residential side of things that is rated low or medium that is on the shutoff list for this winter, those are the people that have not yet signed an agreement. So the people that are on the high category for shutoff in January or February, those improvements do have to be made. But everybody else, it's either fix the issue, bring it up to standard before the date, or sign an agreement. So this is where we stand. There are lots of people working on it right now. Lots of people have contractors, and we have, I believe there are 16 re-inspections scheduled currently. If we look at commercial, it's a similar situation for the January shutoff dates, low and medium. Those could sign the agreement or could complete improvements by then. The ones that are in the high categories, however, do need to be fixed by February. So I just didn't want this to come as a surprise as we get into winter. We are trying very hard to communicate with all of the customers. We'll be sending out another reminder notice to try to make sure that everybody is on the same page.
Brandy, thanks for bringing this to our attention. Of the customers that are on the potential show-off list, have any of them been completely non-acknowledging of communications, or have you been able to be in contact with every one of the customers that's at risk?
Yes, we have been in contact with every one of the customers that's at risk. There were some cases that it was a delayed communication, and that's why you see, we've got shutoffs way out until January of 24. Some people we've had trouble getting in touch with, but these people are all aware, have either received the letter, come talk to us. Tommy's been fielding a lot of phone calls.
Okay, thank you.
Brandy, I guess the other question I have for you, is there anything the board can do to help support you? Do you feel like, I know this has been a hard slog for several years, slog being probably not the correct term, but is there other things we could do that haven't been done yet that could help?
I don't think so. It has been a difficult process all around for us, for the community, for everyone. But I do think that the board has been supportive, and I appreciate that. The only thing that I would ask is, as we get closer, if we get into a situation where we are actually in need of shutting people off, that we have the support to follow through with that if needed, knowing that we will do our very best to work with everyone and make sure they complete the requirements. But it would be difficult at this point if we had to backslide and say, oh no, we didn't really, we are going to extend the date again, because the people who are complying are really making a huge amount of effort to do that. And I just want to make sure that we remain consistent as we go forward.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and then, you're correct as far as it's tough on the community, because I know I've been trying to get I think I spent $5,200 so far, and I still can't pass inspection. And over about a 3 or 4 month period. So it's, even if you want to do it, it's not easy to do it.
So in your table, I have a question. The high categories are mixed of propane and electrical, or how many propane, how many?
This is just a summation of both. It's a summation of both.
Combination of
They're
both.
both in there, but electricals, maybe, what would you say, Brandy, 10, 15%?
At maximum, most of our issues are propane, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me if either of these 3 highs is electrical. I know at least 2 of them are propane, but I'm not sure on the third.
Yeah, so you have 4 and 3, 7 altogether coming up and high, and you think most of them are propane?
In residential, 0 of them are electric that are high category.
Yeah, it has been a difficult
And it's
process
also 0
It
for
has
the HOAs.
for
So
everyone.
every one of these, as near as I can tell, is propane of the high category.
Those are all propane.
Okay, thank you very much, Brandy, and thank you for doing this on behalf of the district.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay,
And thank Tommy too.
and thank Tommy
Taking this
too.
over, not knowing what he was getting into.
Okay, let's move on to item F, the wastewater treatment plant membrane replacement.
So you have a staff report here. I won't repeat it, but basically, a couple of years ago, we were told our membranes, or quite a few years ago, we were told our membranes had 1 to 2 years left, and it's been 3. They don't make our membrane modules anymore. They're going to have to basically bastardize another model to make it work. We're going to lose some capacity, but it's not the capacity we're going to lose it's within our permitted area, which right now we are over it, but it does reduce it. But staff's recommending we proceed with this now, because we don't know that Coke will keep this offer to modify an existing or a different model on the table for us, and how long it'll be until that model is obsolete.
I mean, the supply chain under normal circumstances is a long period. And the fact that Coke is willing to do this, the problem is our existing basins aren't big enough for their standard membrane model as it's evolved. And these are the best membranes that we've ever had, by far. So I'm prepared to make a motion that we consummate a deal with Coke immediately.
Yeah, I would second it, but I have a question. How much, this membrane are going to stay after the retrofit?
The retrofit never has and never
It doesn't
will
impact
have
any of
anything to
that.
do with membranes.
Yeah.
No, we were tracking this separately. If you look at any of the capital budgets for the last 5 years, it was,
I wanted to make sure.
it was
Yeah,
its
I'm
own
happy
line.
to second.
Well,
So Eric,
When
what
it comes
happens
to
this-
membranes, Peter's my God, so if he says it's the right thing to do, I believe him.
Eric, what happens, I don't know a ton about membranes in my engineering understanding of these, but help me understand, so if this model has changed, we have to go to a different model. After this one, we're potentially getting installed. What happens next? Are we, is it just whatever's on the market? We have to keep adapting? Will we have to redo?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. We'll have to keep adapting. And who knows what it'll be in the future. It could be a much more expensive retrofit of the basins to make it fit a standard size.
Right. That's
We
what I'm
could
trying
switch
get at.
to cartridge modules instead of hanging. We could, there's 18 different types of wastewater membranes that are out on the market. Some are good, some are not so good, but they are all different configurations and they're all proprietary for the most part. So it makes it very interesting.
So
But yeah,
basically, this is the most cost-effective way and operationally effective way to get us the next generation of.
this is the only, this is the only way without doing a major multi-million dollar project.
Right. And
Yeah.
so my point is that proving this, we need to start thinking about what comes after this potentially and understanding, and whether it's, at some point we have to plan for this to be a potentially expensive cost if we can't continue to modify designs as is or whatnot. Is that a fair assessment of this?
Yes.
When,
I think the point to remember is that if we do this and these membranes perform the way the last batch did, we'll get a decade.
right. And that's my hope. And I guess my question is,
Yeah.
how are we going to think about the risks here? And I'm thinking about, 5 years from now, hopefully they make it at least 5 years, but what planning process would we consider this as a part of, or where do we have to take notes and put a pin in this, that we have to come back to this, or there's a large cost that we have to put into a reserve study? I don't know what it is, but I'm nervous about this whole process, just because it's not, like you said, you have to kind of manipulate what's the current model to what we have. It just scares me a little bit. So I want to make sure that we're thinking for the longer future after this.
Yeah, we constantly monitor operational norms, and we're going to know if the things are sliding, downhill, and that will give us time to start planning the next steps.
Okay.
The only other option is to build a new treatment plant.
And even then, we'll have the same problem that
Right.
Doug's bringing up. We build a whole brand new treatment plant. What happens in 5 years, right?
Right.
So it's, no matter what we do, that question exists, and that's
Yeah,
what we
it's
have
evolving.
operators for.
Rapidly evolving.
They're watching it.
Are there,
I do share Doug's concern, and I think maybe not this year, but in the coming year, we need to have a plan for the future.
That's the master plans we approved in the capital project.
okay, good. So is there a motion to,
So moved.
okay,
There was a second.
Second.
and a second right there? Okay, roll call, please.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Itataranda,
Hi.
Perot,
Aye.
Thornburg, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay,
Let's hope we can get them in time.
I will order it right away. All right, so we're ready for item G, Alpine County Measure D. This is an informational one and possible an action one. A Measure D was submitted to Alpine County, which will appear on the November ballot. The text of the measure is there in the dialogue, but it basically prohibits biomass conversions to energy in Alpine County under a set of certain situations. I am part, say the Alpine County Board of Supervisors, several of them are interested in opposing this, but it's not being done by the Board of Supervisors, but several people approached me asking whether I'd participate. I've looked at it. I think this is a grievous mistake if put in place. And so there is an opportunity if we want. So I'm part of the No on Measure D as an individual. I feel it's worthy of the board's consideration to be on record opposing D. And if everybody agrees, then on my signature, I would then be listed as president. There's about 700 voters in Alpine County, and several hundred of them are right here in our district. So I can go into the specifics of why it's bad or not, or I just see if people have already read through it. If they have questions for me, I think I believe it's appropriate. We have done this on a few other occasions on other issues. This concerns forest health and energy creation in the county. So I think it's of general interest, even though I don't think this would ever specifically apply to KMPUD. It's not a good policy in general, in my view.
Bob, is this
Thank you very
related to, I feel like, and I might be misremembering because I don't think I was on the board at the time, but wasn't there some biomass company that came forward to the board for an agenda?
Yeah, a
item or something like
biomass
that?
company
Is that related
approached-
to this?
A biomass company, yes,
Sort
in a
of.
way.
Oh, sort of.
It could be. A biomass company approached and said, were we interested in biomass to heat? And then selling the heat, where we'd have to put in a distribution system, whatever. And I think it was, I don't remember if it was the board or the planning committee felt it was kind of out of our wheelhouse right at the moment.
Voted on.
We voted against proceeding with that at the time. There are no specific proposals in Alpine County at the moment. However, the people who are proposing this believe that there may be one that's a biomass to electricity that's done by incineration, which is a pretty terrible idea, but it could be voted down on its own merits, but to eliminate all conversions is an overreaction, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's poorly written and way too vague.
I
It just,
appreciate your support on that. Yeah.
And I think it'd be good if you could
Okay.
actually oppose that measure on the behalf of.
All right. So if the board will consider it, then I propose a motion to say that the board, is
Opposes.
as
Measure D.
opposes Measure D on the November ballot,
Yes.
and there'd be no fiscal cost to doing this of any
So
form.
I second the measure.
Okay. Is there any discussion? John, Doug, Peter?
I just think considering the state of our forest, you want every option available.
Yeah.
Because the trees are dying at an incredible rate.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
Have you seen the west side lately, Peter? Have you seen the west side lately?
Okay.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like this in the last 3 months, and it's happening all over the Sierra.
Okay, then if there's,
You were talking about what, the algae? No?
The tree die-off, there's a fungus that's hitting all
Oh,
the
yeah,
firs on
yeah,
the west
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
and it's astonishing.
okay, then call for a vote.
Sure. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Minich-Randa.
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Nordberg, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. I'll be putting in personal time on helping the committee defeat this.
Great.
But it won't involve any KMPUD time or costs. Okay, great.
Terry,
Now-
did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not allowed to talk about it.
You're not allowed to? Oh, really? I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Okay,
Should be on the merit, no blanket.
exactly. Okay, let's move on. Doug, you have 2 items from the planning committee.
Sure.
We'll start with item H first.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, Bob.
Oh,
before we get
I
started.
was just going to say, I really appreciate the work of the planning committee on putting this together and the thought process. I think it's really excellent.
Sure, you're welcome. And I will echo the gratitude to everyone who's on the planning committee, some of which are on the call joining as well. So thanks to everyone's just time and effort to put into this. So we'll start with item H here, which is about the modifications to our electric ordinance. Some of these are related to the comment made at the very beginning of the meeting today. In general, just as a reminder, what we have been trying to do is, since the board approved last year to change the way that we charge base rates and everything, to allow for some accommodations in certain situations for the AMUs of customers to change and under certain circumstances. And the 2 circumstances we're discussing are allowing an AMU to decrease in some functional way. That's the item 1 in the document that's showing on the screen now. And then the second one is to provide a standard discount to an AMU where there are certain use cases that we want to have in place. I'm not going to go through everything in great detail because hopefully everyone had a chance to read it, but I will just say at a high level, again, what we're trying to do is to accommodate situations that are reasonable, that we want to make sure that because these are fixed for a long time, that if people's lifestyles changes or they do all electric, which is something that the board has been trying to give the community directive to do, we want to provide incentives to do that without overly impacting their long-term costs. At a high level, I think the things that we as a committee were trying to focus on are balancing the needs for flexibility of our customers against the implementation costs of our staff, crossed with people being able to maybe game the system in a way that is not with our intended use, where maybe they could make a one-time reduction in some case, or one type of situation where they're able to take advantage of a system that is not necessarily intended in that way. So those are the types of things that we are trying to trade off. The purpose of this conversation today is, again, as a high level, what our goal is, which we talked about at the last board meeting, was to have a workshop where we'll go into much more depth on these recommendations that the staff is going to come forward with. But what we're doing today is just trying to make sure that the recommendations, as stated in the board packet here, are consistent with what the board generally would like us to see, if you have feedback or comments, then that way we can take it, because our next steps at this point would be going forward and asking staff to make some actual concrete proposals that the planning committee would then discuss, and then ultimately, again, come forward with as a larger workshop where we'd be able to discuss this as a community, and then with the goal of having this enshrined into, our ordinances so that we can start doing this for the next fiscal year. And Bertrand or anyone else involved in planning, I welcome any other comments or color on this.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Doug. I think you made a good summary here. There is a few, I mean, it's still a work in progress, and but there is a few things that I'd like actually to bring up to discussion today to see if what the board thinks. On the point one, I think this is pretty simple. This is offering a reset with the existing structure that we have. I think it's working pretty well. On the point two, I'm a bit concerned on offering an AMU, meaning a base fee discount. I think what we want to do is we should aim the discount toward people that use electricity for heating. And I think it'd be more appropriate to have a rate discount, not a base fee reduction. So make sure that people actually consume electricity to get a rebate. If you do it on the base fee, people could be not consuming anything and still having a rebate. And I think that actually detrimental. So we just broached the concept at the last meeting. We didn't actually get deep enough, but I am concerned for the all electric. I think we should think about how we make it so it only goes toward people that actually use electricity for heating. That's basically the main consumption thing. So there's a little concern about people who have a propane tank. I know there is cost for people to switch away, and I think that's going to be detrimental. But there are a bunch of people in the valley that have in-ground propane tank, and I think we need to be careful on how we deal with that. And that's, again, detail of implementation. And on PBC,
No, we're not talking about PBC right now. The PBC is a separate agenda.
I'm sorry. I just going through my list. Yes, you didn't mention PBC, but so my main concern is making sure that the discount is actually going toward people who do actually consume electricity, not people that just have an account. That makes sense what I'm saying. Do you understand my angle or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what we discussed this a little bit as like, instead of 22 cents, you get a, 2% or 5%. I don't know, 1% or 2.5%. I don't know.
I'm talking about concept here. I'm talking about.
I know. I'm making a joke, Bertrand. I'm just joking. But the idea, what you're suggesting is instead of an AMU discount, which would affect their EDU, you're suggesting that it would be on the kilowatt hour, the dollars per kilowatt hour rate as an all electric customer, which we
because we want only discount people who consume.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could.
Let's
have a board discussion on that. I guess is what I would say is if there's any feedback on that.
Yeah.
And Doug, the only feedback I would offer is, I think there's some minimum occupancy that has to occur in order for an AMU year to be valid. And right now we ignore years where it's less than 1 kilowatt. And since we're dealing with integers, that's usually a house that has the power disconnected. But I think I think we should at least have staff think about some minimum occupancy in order for an AMU year to be valid. And just to add that into the consideration.
I think that's a good point. Sure.
It's just similar to the point I was making. I mean, we want to help people that have this huge bill because they're trying to heat their house with electricity, which we encourage them to do, but it's still.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Other comments? So Doug, you're just looking for comments from the board that directionally.
That's right, Bob.
Or-
At this point, I think comments like, like Bertrand has mentioned, we can ask staff to look into things like a, AMU versus a rate discount, or, again, the minimum kilowatt hours per year to, allow for an AMU year to be included in this calculation. I think those are good pieces of feedback. But other than that, as long as no one has any major objections to this will, I think, give staff, Eric and I have talked about this. He said that, previously, and Eric, you can confirm that you think with this as written here with the comments today, we should have enough guidance to help have staff now make some more concrete recommendations that we can then bring back to the board in a future meeting in advance of community session this fall, early winter. Is that correct, Eric?
Definitely not this fall, but let's hope for early winter.
Early winter.
And did you want to mention the thing you and I talked about
Oh, sure.
as another thing to consider? Because it seems so simple.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Thank you for reminding me of that. I slipped my mind a little bit. One of the things that I think, just talking to Eric a little bit about some of the nuances here of implementation is that we have a recommendation in here that, an automatic compute after their first AMU calculation, that there could be a chance where, again, what I said at the top of like trying to consider against people gaming a system here where they would, drop an AMU year and then come back and then have a lower number just because of 1 year. I think our intent of this is that people have a consistent, and I think the word that I've heard before is durable and persistent change. So one thing that the staff could consider here is that the AMU adjusts after 3 years of demonstration, as opposed to after the first year of demonstration. And so I think one of the ideas we originally was that if you have a big drop after 1 year, then you could have your option to have your AMU reset. That's one way of thinking about it. Another option that Eric and I talked about after the planning committee meeting was possibly having a demonstration for 3 years, and then it gets reset. So you have to show the demonstration for the full 3 years. And again, the 3 years is something that we've been trying to stick to because it's consistent with our new ownership periods and everything else that we do. But that's just another way of looking at it, in some ways to incentivize or to discourage, I should say, any sort of transient changes or intentional gaming of our intent here.
And I think this goes directly to what Mr. Brinkman was saying. If we did adopt something like that, they could pick a different 3-year period of demonstrable sustainable reduction and use that 3-year period as their AMU. If they, whatever we define as significant and durable, blah, 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 this would sit perfectly for them to eliminate their construction usage.
Yeah. I mean, I will say in that context though, Eric, I think that the relief that Mr. Brinkman's asking for would not take place until a few years from now. And so I think that's different than, I don't think his immediate concerns would be resolved per se in this structure as is, but it's just something that, as a board, we would have to consider and what's in our ordinance versus what's, how do we consider a one-off special case? But I think that is something to note here is that depending on how we implement this, when you get the relief or the change, if you will, you would be paying for it for at least a few years potentially.
Yeah, it sounds like almost 4 years. So that's my concern with what you propose here. I think we should have more discussion at planning about that.
Yeah, I think these are just ideas, and I think the staff can mull them over and come with some proposals, and we can then discuss them at planning. But I think at least hopefully directionally, the board understands where the planning committee has been trying to go with this, and if there is agreement in this general direction, then I'd ask that we continue to move forward with some of these caveats and ideas, and there will be ample opportunity to have other discussions on this in the future, I believe.
Yeah, I have a question on 2A3.
Mhm.
Is that, we have information on all the services in a home. So if you look at the use case of somebody converting from propane to electric for whatever use, you're going to see that in their usage, right? Like you're going to see the propane's going to drop if they stop using it, right?
Not for customers that have their own individual tanks, of which there are a number.
Right, but for the ones that
for the ones that are propane customers.
We have a lot of propane customers. So for all the propane customers out there, if you saw their propane go down dramatically or to zero, along with an increase in their electric usage, you've got real empirical data to say a change has happened, right?
Yeah. So the thinking of the planning committee on that is people who use propane in the past have a lower AMU than that actually they are going to use once they shift to electric. And because our rate is now much lower, they already have an incentive to do that. So that's why they would have been, they would not have a reset.
Yeah, that's right.
So you think that's enough incentive to drive the conversions?
That's right, because their AMU is already low based off of not having electric for all of these services. That is, as been discussed by the board many times during the rate study, the upside is only upside. The down, if you add more electric and you already have a fixed AMU that's low when you didn't have electric heating or whatever, or hot water, you just get upside.
So that's
your AMU is going to be 1, but now it's going to be 3.1 or 5.5 or whatever in the future. You're not actually paying for it. It's going to stay 1, and all you're doing is paying that cheap kilowatt hour, even if you're using an AMU that would be equivalent to a much higher EDU.
Okay, I'm cognizant of the time and the fact that this is a topic I'd love to discuss more, but maybe we should just keep to the directional items for now.
Yeah.
And can we move on to
so
the public?
we did get this in that direction.
Yeah, so I think the direction sounds excellent.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And I captured with the two additional things, which is minimum occupancy and AMU versus kilowatt hour discount.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
For capturing
Okay.
Great. Sorry,
Yeah.
Bob, are we ready to move on to I, Bob?
I was going to suggest we move on to the public benefits charge. Yeah.
Great.
If you're
So
okay.
thanks. Again, I won't go through everything in great detail of the recommendations and everything, but the highest level here, we have PBC funds that we're trying to allocate. We had received board direction at the last meeting of the recommendations on what we want to do on energy efficiency and fuel switching. There is an item here that's not listed, but it's in the notes that I have for my report for the planning committee about low income, which we're waiting on council feedback on. So we did not discuss it at the last planning committee, but I just want to make sure that you understand that that is still a potential item that will be discussed in this as a general concept for PBC usage. But in the spirit of what we're talking about in both of these cases, where we have an energy efficiency rebate program and a fuel switching program, at a high level, where I think we're trying to focus our energies are on, heating of hot water and heating of space. So that's where you'll see a lot of these recommendations coming forward from. We also wanted to make sure that we focused on the ability to cover costs for energy efficiency audits or anything that might be associated with people learning about what options are viable for their residences, so that they can make sure that they know what to do. It's hard to know what to install a heat pump if you don't know that that's an option, for example. And so that's one of the things that we did highlight in some of our usage here as well. But again, you can see in our recommendations where we're directionally trying to go with this. And if we're at a stage where for this sort of project, we would ask staff based off of this feedback to come back with something more concrete, at which point we'll come back to the board with final recommendations. And so if there are any thoughts and feedback on this, please let us know now. Otherwise, we will try to move forward with staff in these ways. Bertrand, did you have a comment on PBC from earlier that you wanted to make that I know you cut you off on?
I found a little comment. I think having both the item plus your summary make it a bit confusing. Actually, you were talking about the low income program. That's part of the second part, but that's just a detailed thing. What I wanted to say, I think we need to be clear so we don't create false anticipation or expectation that, for example, you say cost associated with having a professional audit or whatever. I think these rebates are not going, they should be covering part of it only, in my opinion. We should basically offer a percentage with a cap or whatever, but making sure that we are not going to start paying for people doing audit, for example. We just want to help people doing these things, in my opinion. So that's my one comment.
Yes, that's an implementation detail that staff can give us a recommendation on for sure.
Yeah, the goal is enough incentive to get somebody to take action.
Yes,
but no more.
Not more.
Yeah.
So we can do many things. And then another one is, so far you have restricted it to both space heating and water heating, but there are a few appliances that would be extremely beneficial, energy efficiency wise and propane shifting wise. I'm thinking about induction stove, and I'm thinking about clothes dryer. Now there are heat pump clothes dryers that use only electricity, and they are so much more efficient, and that would be helping us propane. So I think maybe we should not be so reductionist even at the beginning, but that's stuff we could discuss at the planning committee.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we discussed a bit of that at the planning committee last time, and I think there was part of this, and look, sure, I'm not opposed to those sorts of things, but I think the thing at the highest level, again, PBC, similar to the last conversation on the last agenda, there's a staff trade-off of ability to implement and focus, and we can always expand this in the future. So I mean, my personal, and I won't speak on behalf of the planning committee, a lot of what my intent for a lot of this is to make sure that we start spending funds as soon as possible, and not necessarily let perfect be the enemy of good in doing so. And so I would love to make sure that we can get out, start spending this money on a couple of smaller, specific ways. And Bertrand, I'd be more than happy to do that as well. But I mean, that's my general bias towards this. So, I mean, if the board feels that we should, look into appliances or other things as well, I'm happy to add that. But that's just, do you understand my perspective of why I wrote it the way I did? And that's when I sent it out for your feedback on it.
I do. I just think it's maybe too short. I agree we should reduce ourselves and try to do everything in one shot. But these two examples I gave are so simple to implement. It's just going to be one-page document, and we're done with that.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to have that as a note.
Yeah. Let's discuss
Eric,
further.
if you can.
Yeah.
And Eric, you can add that as a note too, if that's something that we can consider. If staff finds that amenable to add then as easily, then sure. But that's that just so you understand where I was coming from. So I'm happy to add that as a note there.
Okay, good. So directionally, everyone okay with this direction?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Then let's wrap up with the general manager's report next.
Sure. So there was a TriTech meeting today. Vail is proposing to put in 67 new parking spaces that will be perpendicular parking all along Loop Road, from the top of Loop Road all the way to our vaporizers, and additional at Renwick by our fire hydrant, for multiple reasons. One's storm drainage, additional storm drainage that was ruined by the prior administration, not Vail, but by Chuck Cobb, et cetera. They eliminated a bunch of storm drainage, promised to repair it, never repaired it. And now they're proposing a new project that will exacerbate the problem of water running onto the district property. So we oppose it on those grounds. For fire reasons, proximity to our critical infrastructure, which includes a pressure reducing vault, as well as hydrants and transformers and our vaporizer sheds. We oppose it on a public safety issue. And for emergency access for fire, Rick was great. He had a lot of pictures of without perpendicular parking, the issues, which I think was illuminating for the new planners, because there's only one planner that's still on TriTac that has had any longevity with any of the counties. So from a fire safety, public emergency vehicle access, and then also having people perpendicularly back into our parking as we're trying to get snow removal equipment out, the 950 loader, our tracklesses, our equipment. It's a nightmare from the district perspective, and as such, we opposed it. They're going to be providing the district with a deposit and meeting with us to talk about potential changes that could make it more palatable to the district.
I was wondering about that, and I thought you would be fairly vocal on that.
You thought right. Caltrans signage project, I wish Terry was still here, but is still alive with smaller changeable message signs. I'm not speaking on behalf of the district, but I think it still creates light pollution for areas that doesn't have it. And personally, I will oppose it, but additionally, they continue to think they're going to get power from the district. And I don't know that they really realize what that means. Power from the district for the changeable message signs. I don't think they really knows what that means. So we're going to continue to keep an eye on that project. And I encourage the community to continue, because they mobilize quite well. And I encourage them to continue to track that. Aqua JPIA, for those of you that remember, I encourage the board to switch from CalPERS to Aqua JPIA. Our health insurance is going down 10% this year. So we made a heck of a good decision. It had already saved us $130,000, and it continues to save us money. CalPERS is going up this year.
Would you please send our thanks to the general manager?
I will let him know.
Okay.
Rick, can you put that on your to-do list? Thank you. And that's all I have. And Colorado was great.
Okay.
I'm surprised that Val didn't approach you at all before putting up that project. I mean, this is amazing.
The way we learned about it, did you read the TriTac agenda?
Yes, I did.
So the way we learned about it was Chuck Beatty at Amador County Planning, with whom I've known him for 20 years.
Yeah.
He sent me a heads up. Have you seen this? And
Yeah.
that's the only way we found out about it. So it was disappointing that it happened, but you know.
If they say they want to work with us.
Well,
Yeah.
you're gesturing to where Caroline was.
okay.
Caroline has been very good about keeping us in the loop and giving us heads
For
up
me, that was
early.
bad.
I know, but I don't want her to be, she's been very
So
proactive
she
in
was not
communicating.
part of that.
She's
game.
not part of that. She's mountain operations versus the,
Eric and I will follow up on this and try to figure out how we make
Yeah.
it work better.
but yeah.
We will.
Yeah, they need to talk that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
We understand.
We want to work with them, but
I agree. Okay,
That's all I had.
operations report, Rick?
Just real brief, as Eric mentioned, we've really got a good relationship with Aqua JPIA, our insurance company. And the risk control manager for the insurance company came up this week to teach 2 classes. One was on confined space and the other one was on trench shoring. And she also did a facilities inspection. And so we'll look to see her report on how we're doing globally on the risk side. But we've had a long-term relationship with Robin, and I think she likes coming to Kirkwood. And so, again, I think it's just our good relationship with our insurance company that keeps us out of trouble and keeps the prices down. Other than that,
And Brandy took her on a hike up to the tanks,
both tanks,
both tanks.
Oh, both tanks.
she didn't flinch. So other than that, I think everything got covered today's board meeting. I've been out of the office this week, but I'd like to bring back kind of a recap of the summer festival at the next board meeting in September to give you some of the numbers and where we are with some of our plans on purchasing items that people, for example, bought during the auction online. So I'll bring that back in September on the fire department. That's it.
And we one more, Rick, you forgot. We have a new fire command vehicle.
Oh,
So
yeah, we
budgeted, and Rick picked it up Monday.
Monday, yeah.
Wow.
So we're placing the 2018 expedition that the county gave us with a newer command type vehicle. And
It
so
wasn't a 2018.
It was older than that.
Yeah, it was like
it was
Ni-
95.
2008 maybe, or 98.
Yeah, the antique in the
So-
parking lot.
Yeah.
So actually, that brings me one question I wanted to ask earlier. There was a fairly 20K expense on the 93 unit. What was the problem?
Hydraulics.
Oh,
Oh, wait, on the, sorry. on the
Engine
90
93.
I was thinking 924. No, 93. That was the,
We had an insurance claim with Engine 93 for damage, which was paid by the insurance company. The deductible is $500. And then we did miscellaneous pump maintenance. We chased out a couple hydraulic leaks, and I think there were a few new items that we added to it, just small equipment on the engine itself. Just
Okay.
regular maintenance.
yeah, since we had it in Modesto and we had the people there that could work on it, we had them fix everything, not
Okay.
just the body damage.
that's
Right.
good.
Okay, let's move on to standing committee reports. Start with finance.
We already covered the 2 items in the agenda already.
Okay, operations.
Operations did not meet.
Okay, and communications.
Communications, we talked about several items that, the main thing I'd like to remind the board is we're having a safety seminar on August 18th. And we're gonna have, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, Chief Boyce and Daniel B. Bradford. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I urge anybody who has the time to watch the seminar.
And if they don't have the time, it'll be saved on the website too.
Right, definitely.
So I'd like to add something on fire communication.
Sure, go ahead.
Related to fire. I mean, there is a lot of misconception in the valley of what's legal, not legal, fire wise, fire related. And I think communication maybe should try to help so people know what they can do, a fire pit or not, or something like that. So I see it personally as part of KMPUD community to the service to the community. And so I'd like to have other feedback from other board members. Should the PUD be involved in helping communicating these things? And the next step would be actually, I know that the fire department has authority to signing off on design fire-wise. And the question is, so because you have multiple not legislation, jurisdictions between Vel that do the mountain and the alpine and Amador, and it's very confusing, and that should our own department be able to actually decide to say that the fire are not allowed in the valley. I mean, currently it's a mess. I mean, it's all department, and I think maybe at the board and certainly at the communication, I would like to invite that we do some work in that direction. What other board members think.
My only suggestion was that maybe a calendar for the next operations committee and find out from staff what we're allowed to do and not do.
Well, we
Figure out how-
already talked a little bit of that. Actually, we are all allowed to do a warming fire. So what is a warming fire? And it's actually based on Google, it has to be colder than 55. So if people start doing bonfire in the valley, it doesn't seem to apply. But anyway, it's a mess. Because
I would just look for the communications committee to recommend what we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there is a fire department as well. I'd like to put into that
Well,
discussion.
we could
actually.
utilize
Yeah.
something from the newsletter, maybe if
I'll
we get,
leave
it.
we need to get clarification.
Why don't you see what we could do
Get
that's be helpful?
clarification on what the, because I would anticipate that rules will get stricter as we get closer to fall.
Yes.
Okay.
And we just communicate that in the newsletter.
Okay, anything else from planning?
No,
Okay, thanks. On personnel, the only thing I would want to mention is we have arranged to increase our staffing from our outsourced agency to provide more assistance for employee questions that come up. So there'll be,
HR.
yeah, so there'll be a regular person, and the first meeting is happening later this month.
August 23rd.
And then that will be a resource that's available for employees for helping them on employment issues.
We're going to hire an HR person.
It's the outsourced agency we already use. We're buying some additional resources from them to be
Okay, so
available. But
consultant will-
yeah, but it'll be a regular person assigned that will make regular visits
Okay.
here. So I just wanted to mention that. Two other things that are kind of related to this. Doug and I are on the LAFCO committee now. And I just want to mention that we didn't quite know what we were signing up for, but the main thing we have to do is there's a requirement every 5 years of doing this. It's called the sphere of influence. So each agency looks at what areas they manage and do they have sufficient resources to supply support. There was a proposal at the meeting to hire a consultant to do that, and we converted that to something, a no cost item, where we will update our own section. Everybody else will do the same. I also want to mention that the next board meeting, we're going to keep on the original date of September 2nd, because
September 9th.
September 9th, rather, because the 2nd really didn't work for everybody, so we won't change that. And then the 501c3 did approve additional money to be used for the fire department to attract and retain.
And Rick is happy to say he hasn't had to take a week. Rick is happy to say he hasn't had to take a weekend on call since we made that change.
So it's had an impact, Rick.
Not a whole weekend. There's been a few in there, but it's gotten a lot better.
Okay, so it's making a difference.
It is right now.
Okay,
Good.
and then
Bob,
our
Bob, just
yeah.
with LAFCO, wasn't the other item that the Peddler Hill annexation was approved too?
yeah, very, very good. Thank you for mentioning that. So LAFCO had to approve the annexation of Caltrans on Peddler Hill. So they now have legal permission to move forward. All they have to do is their engineering work and the costs.
And
And
order
then-
their
And
transfer.
they'll be all set. And then lastly, I want to mention that our request for $1 million for a fire engine in the state budget is still in the budget in one of the trailer bills. And so we will know at the end of August whether the state budget is going to cover our item. There are no temporary advisory committees. So general, is there any general discussion there, board member?
I did have one thing I missed on my general manager's report.
Okay.
We did, so we did retain the DTA to do our special tax assessment, and they have begun that process and have reached out to all 3 counties to get their list of the parcels that they believe are in here for which we receive property taxes. So they'll get a pretty comprehensive list. And Rick gave me draft budgets to start with, and we'll be sending those to them as well.
Great. So it's moving. Okay, any board member have a general discussion item?
I would-
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, Bertrand, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I didn't hear what you
No,
said.
that's okay.
I was just saying, Bob, I think, I've mentioned it in a couple of meetings and I don't know if this has happened yet, but is like where are we keeping track of things that we need to think about in the longer term future? Cause I think a couple of them came up today in terms of like, propane. I think Bertrand had a point on the propane
Yeah.
balancing on, even like the wastewater membranes, things like that, that I feel like
Right.
I would love, I will be a broken record on this potentially because I'm easily going to forget all the stuff, all these good conversations that we have if we
Okay.
don't write them down.
Give it a name and remind us every month, but I agree, it's something we should develop. Understood and
Thank
agreed.
you.
I
thank you.
second you, Doug.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, with no other general discussion.
So I was just going to
Oh, do you
say,
have something? I'm sorry.
so we talk about fire communication. I think I'd like to have a discussion at the board level on at least understand what are the responsibilities and duties that our fire department in the valley. I think I'm not clear on all where the limit is, and I think it'd be useful to have such a discussion at some point.
Okay, I'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you all for your time. The meeting's adjourned then.
Thanks, everyone.